Hey all, here at OS Reviews. Today we're taking a look at a interesting pair of TWS wireless buds from Moondrop called the Nico Cake. Now, if you've been in the IEM market, you'll probably know that Moondrop makes a lot of very beautiful looking monitors, which are typically wired and used by artists and those that just want a little bit more higher fidelity, hi-fi grade audio listening. But this marks one of their forays into the wireless space with a TWS design. It's a lot more accessible. In fact, it sells for only around $43 and has active noise cancellation or ANC built on in as well, in addition to a companion app. So actually seems like a pretty solid deal, at least here on paper. And just like their IEM's, design still is rather distinctive. It's not really just a generic clone of something. It has these interesting accents, which almost reminds me of a small cat or a fox imprinted on it, and the top lid also has this kind of interesting texture and shade that's going on. Just seems like there's a bit more of attention to detail. Now it comes with 13mm dynamic drivers. The claim is made custom in-house and using parts from Japan, so they claim that the quality should also be quite good, just like their IEMs. Now, it is worth mentioning, though, that other specs are fairly entry-level in the sense that we don't really have, let's say, aptX built on in, and one other omission would be a low-latency gaming mode. This thing is really meant just for music and podcasts, I would say, and for watching videos, it should also be fine using Bluetooth 5.0. Touch controls, battery life will get you up to 12 hours with the case, and then the buds themselves claim to last around 4 hours when popped out of continuous listening time, which is a little bit low. Going with this really cute design, they've also made custom voice prompts, almost like an anime character is reading it back out to you versus the usual robotic formal voice prompts that we hear. And it does have a few EQ modes that you can change between as well. So here's the packaging. It looks kind of interesting. We have some additional specs and the frequency curve that they've used to tune the drivers on the back. And then we've got just the headphones themselves, which we'll take a closer look at in a moment, along with a simple USB Type-C charging cable, some spare silicone tips, along with just the quick user guide. Now, it is worth mentioning that the touch control is pretty responsive, and you're able to use it for playing and pausing your music, going through ANC on versus off, and bringing up the voice assistant or answering a phone call, but you aren't able to actually raise the volume higher or lower at the moment. Now, like I said, there is a companion app, which is called the Moondrop Link app, which allows you to remap some of the controls, but interestingly, volume is still one that they haven't added to that software either. So that is one thing I do hope they can add as a over-the-air update. So taking a closer look at the Nico Cake, it does have this pretty dazzling looking top cover, which is made out of this lightly ridged plastic material that says Moondrop, and otherwise we have that interesting cat logo on the bottom and some slightly more rounded corners and edges. Overall, though, the body is constructed out of a polycarbonate plastic. It doesn't feel really any different for something like Redmi AirDots or Apple AirPods. It doesn't feel, let's say, ultra premium, but overall not bad either for the price. There's a reset key, and then on the bottom here, everything is in the same accent color that tells you some basic stats, and then the Type-C port there for charging. There is an LED light there which will glow when the buds are charging, and when you open up the door here, it will automatically turn on and begin to pair quickly with your device. It is a pretty fast process in my testing so far. It's a little reminiscent of some of the Halo buds that we've seen, primarily with this door design. It's a little bit on the thick side, so if you just push it a little bit, it usually just snaps shut. The buds themselves having that advertised, really interesting logo with that cat icon, and just very interesting flat design going on. Everything looks quite clean, but also not too flashy or over the top. We have a slightly larger ridge on the very top there, and that is pretty much it. The overall weight and the feeling is very familiar to something like the, let's say, Apple AirPods. If you're wearing these, it doesn't feel too stressful and still is lightweight. Stem is a little bit shorter than the standard AirPods, and as a whole, again, felt secure as well, even if you're doing a little bit of jogging or running around. Now here is what the animated voice prompts are like. Let's do a quick demo. So there we go. It is a little bit cartoon-like, but I think it's kind of a fun touch nonetheless, but you aren't able to really change that voice prompt either. Now let's take a closer look at the companion app, and it is super basic, so don't expect anything really advanced, but you are able to, let's say, once you are connected, see if there's any firmware updates, and then customize the aforementioned touch controls, basically just turning functions on or off. So things like skip tracks, play pause commands, if you want to change between double click versus triple tap, or some other command, you can also go through this list and set that up. But again, there's no way to add volume up or volume down at the moment. And it is worth mentioning that although these have ANC, it doesn't currently have a audio transparency or ambient mode. That's something that we typically see on ANC buds, but it is one thing that it also seems to have been purposefully omitted at this moment at least. Now in terms of the EQ, again, super basic, but we're able to also go through these effects that do change the sound signature a little bit. So there's that balanced mode, which is a little bit more neutral and realistic. There's a Moondrop Classic that you can try out, a X Dynamic that punches up the bass, also a no bass mode, and then the final one here is pretty weird spelling, at least in English, and at first I thought it might have been just a poor translation between Chinese to English, but if you look on their kind of manual and website, it looks like it is a very purposeful name that they chose. So it's based on maybe a German word. So it's a tuning that reproduces the characteristics of an S curve. Jumping into performance and audio quality, overall they are not shabby sounding at all for the budget price, but that's kind of the expectation from the brand that is more exclusively known just for audio. But I wouldn't say they're necessarily also going to jump out and be kind of the best sounding pair of buds that I've ever tried, compared to more expensive ones that have triple drivers or LDAC and hi-fi certification. But definitely very good for what you're paying for. They are very clean. There's not too much distortion that I could hear even at higher volume levels. And for the most part, you do get a nice mix of details when it comes to instrumentals, clear and not too tinny or shrill, nothing like that. A pretty comfortable listening experience for the vast majority of genres, whether it's EDM, pop music, or acoustic tracks. With that being said, I found that the bass, at least in the balanced mode, to not be the most prominent thing in the world. You can still hear a bit of a kick in the lower frequencies if there is a drum beat, but if you are a bass head, that is one area where trying out that bass boosted mode will give you a bit more of that satisfactory experience. No issues here when it comes to connectivity. I didn't get disconnected while walking around. Playing and pausing felt really smooth. Touch controls, again, were very responsive and easy to master, which is good. And I can also use them to watch YouTube videos, and the audio and the video weren't really out of sync either. Last but not least, talking about the active noise cancellation, it does make a difference when you have it turned on, but like most budget buds, it's not going to be quite to the same extent of what Bose and Sony can offer at the moment. So it doesn't really cancel everything out, but for things like lower frequency sounds, fan engines, those things do get repressed, and you're able to listen to music with a bit more comfort without turning the volume quite as high. So that's more or less it for the Moondrop Nico Cake TWS wireless buds. Just a really cute design that they have implemented, and also really not shabby when it comes to the sound quality. Very clean. I do like that it has a few more advanced functions like ANC despite the low price, a nice companion app that gives you some basic additional controls, and again, just a bit more of attention to detail than you'd expect. Part of that though is carried over by this brand that has a legacy of doing stuff like this on their wired headphones. So if you want something that has a bit more of character to it, but you aren't expecting, let's say, every single feature under the sun, I think this is still a very solid pair of basic buds at the end of the day. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.